Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, it's Susan Kaufman here for Attitude Magazine. You are listening to our ADHD Experts audio series. We are so pleased today to welcome Alan Brown. He is here to help all of us ADHD adults fix our self-defeating habits such as screen addiction, eating poorly, multitasking, and so much more. An entrepreneur and a coach, Alan Brown created the award-winning series ADD Crusher, the video series. I can't tell you how wonderful these are. You really need to go to his website, www.addcrusher.com. He has lived the life that he is going to be talking to us about. He was undiagnosed until well into his adulthood, and his untreated ADHD resulted in all the usual symptoms that we all know: underachievement, substance abuse, and much more. And after being diagnosed, he really found it hard to learn coping strategies from books. I know this is something that all of us can identify with. And he developed his own strategies while building a successful advertising career and number of startups. So Alan Brown's offering a free ebook, 5 things you're doing every day that make your ADHD worse, at www.addcrusher.com, and so check it out. Thank you so much for being with us today, Alan. We are so grateful for your time.
Thank you, Susan.
Before Alan begins his presentation, let me just briefly describe how ADHD Experts works. Welcome all of you. Thank you for attending today. You are muted. Please post your questions for Alan Brown in the box on your screen. He'll present, go through his slides, which I think you're going to love, and then respond to as many questions as time permits. So just keep posting those questions and we will serve them up to Alan. If you have audio problems, please dial in via your phone line. It's almost certainly your internet connection, and there's nothing we can do about it from here. After our session, you'll find a summary of Alan's slides as well as the replay of this webinar on the Attitude website, attitudemag.com/webinars. And a podcast version will be available in the iTunes store and the ADHD Experts audio series in a couple of weeks. So with that, let me turn it over to Alan, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you again, Susan, and thanks everyone for being here. Thanks also to Stuart back behind the scenes making things happen. This is one of the most important presentations I do, and I'm going to jump right into it because the first slide up in here, and do I have control of the slides yet? I think I may not yet. Let's see. There we go. I needed to click on it. So we ADDers, we're at a disadvantage from the get-go, right? So we really should not be adding more troubles to our plate, and yet we do. And there are lots of things that we do to ourselves or don't do for ourselves that either make our ADHD worse or just make it seem like it's worse, which to me, they're basically the same thing. So I'm going to share 7 things today, and we're going to 7 things that make our ADHD worse in a way. They're self-defeating behaviors, and I'm going to talk about how we may be doing them, exactly how we make them, it makes our ADHD worse or seem worse, and then we're going to talk about how to fix them. But before we get into that, I always like to open a presentation with this quote from Bruce Lee: "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." And why do I open a presentation with this? Because I'm about to throw a number of good, important things at you, and you can feel good about having come here and join this webinar today, which is great that you did, so pat yourself on the back. But unless you're actually taking some action after this is over, and then doing the same tomorrow and the next day and the next day, we might as well be sitting together and watching cartoons. So listen to Bruce Lee, and to build on that, I'm going to be sharing 7 things. What I'd like you to do is forget them all, except for 2. As you're taking notes or making mental notes, just circle 1 or 2 things that really resonated with you, and then leave the others for another time. And then just really work on 1 or 2 of these until it becomes a habit. Okay? This is really important. A lot of these presentations throw a lot of information at you. And if we think that we're going to do 10 new behaviors after seeing a presentation like this, we're kidding ourselves. But if we just take 1 or 2 and really focus in on it, we can actually have a situation where a week from now, our life is actually a little bit different, and then a month from now, and then a year from now. All right, I've beaten that dead horse plenty, okay? Let's get into this world of ways that we make our ADHD worse. The first one is eating crap. Now, we ADDers have distinct brain chemistry, and by the same token, we have unique dietary needs. One example is we actually metabolize fats and carbohydrates differently from other people. So if diet is important for anybody's well-being, it's doubly important for us because we have this unique brain to feed. And now here's what we're doing to make our ADHD worse or seem worse. There are three main areas of dietary crap that either wittingly or unwittingly we're feeding to our fragile brains: sugar, simple carbs, and artificial or processed foods. Now, how does this make your ADHD worse or seem worse? Well, sugar and carbs, particularly simple carbs, they jack up your blood glucose for a very quick spurt of mental energy. And then it just dissipates. It just goes away. Now, you don't get any long-lasting brain power from these sugar and carbs. And so your brain gets just kind of left in the gutter. This is why you keep reaching into that bowl for just a few more M&Ms, or just reaching back into the bowl for a few more of those potato chips. And artificial and processed foods, the third one of these dietary crap foods that I talk about, they tend to be loaded with sugar and carbs to begin with, and then they're also just kind of problematic in terms of metabolism, so they're never good. So, the upshot here is that you know you cannot have your cake and eat it too, or your chips, or your Kraft macaroni and cheese, especially if you're an ADDer. Now, how can we fix this? Well, first, knowing the simple fact that sugar, simple carbs, and toxins to the ADDer are like a ball and chain to a sprinter. I mean, we got to cut this crap out. So you want to cut out your sugary foods. Cinnabon is not a breakfast. It just drives me nuts when these fast food places, IHOP, and I don't mean to single out anybody, but they advertise these foods that are just mounds of sugar and simple carbs. This is not a breakfast for an ADDer. Switch from simple carbs. These are also known as white foods, like white bread, white rice, etc., white potatoes. Switch to complex carbs, brown foods, brown rice, whole grains. When you pull glucose from these foods, from complex foods, they last longer in terms of brain power. And by the way, the most brain power you're going to get from food is from protein. And that's the whole other topic we could get into. But replace sugary, carb-filled meals, especially breakfast, with protein. All right. And then last, reduce processed foods by shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. There's little reason to venture into the middle aisles of food. This is where all the shelf-stable junk is. Here's something that a lot of folks don't realize, and that is that there are a lot of quote-unquote healthy drinks. And even these pure juices and vitamin water, and I could just go on with this list. We all know that soda pop is just a complete waste of caloric intake. But these so-called healthy foods, if you look at the ingredients labels, they have tons of sugar in them. And so if you are sitting down trying to work and you are sipping on a Gatorade or a vitamin water or even one of these fresh juices, especially if they're from concentrate, you're just putting a lot of sugar in your brain and you're not getting any lasting mental energy from them. Water is a great thing to drink because we typically don't get enough water. Now, if you abide by just a few of these principles, you will actually see a difference, and very quickly. And I'm not joking. I just this morning, true story, just this morning got an email from someone who's been using the ADD Crusher program for just 2 weeks, and I actually cried because he said that, among other things, but the most important thing that he has been changing is his diet and getting a little bit more exercise. And the reason it brought a tear to my eyes is because he said, what it's been able, the impact is that I've actually been able to spend more quality time with my daughter. Just imagine that, just by cutting the crap out of your diet, giving your brain more power to be able to get that work done more quickly and efficiently. That's really kind of a neat thing. So I don't always cry when I get emails, but I actually did get cheered up on this one. Now, I like to have an action step with every strategy that I teach because I want to start forming the neural pathways that are the beginning of creating a new habit. Now, we won't have time to do this for every one of the 7 things I'm going to talk about today, but here would be your action step for this lesson. Make a list of all your typical breakfasts, your typical lunches, your typical dinners, and your typical snack foods, right? Maybe you can make a chart, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks across the top, and then down the columns, what are your most frequent foods in those categories. And then identify where you're eating crap. If you're eating cold cereal for breakfast, especially a sugary one, you circle that. If you're eating a Cinnabon for breakfast, if you are having a big doughy sandwich with white bread and a bag of chips and then a Gatorade, circle all that. And then cut the crap. All right? Just replace those foods with something better, whole grains, lower sugar and protein. All right, let's go to the next thing here. And this is such a great word, screen sucking. It was coined by Dr. Ned Hollowell to describe the ridiculous amount of time people spend in front of electronic screens. And it's not just TV screens. It's the screens on our laptops, on our video games, our tablets, our smartphones. And of course, we need these gadgets to work, to stay organized, and to have a needed bit of fun. But ADDers, sometimes our addictive use of these gadgets makes our ADHD worse by stealing precious time. They actually inhibit healthy sleep. There's a lot of research on that. And they divert us from doing the stuff we know we should be doing. So think about it. If there's one thing ADDers never have enough of, it's what? It's time. We never have enough time. So if there's one thing we should not be doing, is wasting it. And I don't mean to be judgmental, but when we've spent 3 hours watching TV that doesn't teach us anything, and that's 98.3% of TV content, right? We have just put ourselves behind the 8 ball on one or more projects, or further behind the 8 ball, on projects that we will soon wish we had more time to do. But in addition, as I mentioned previously, these electronic gadgets, they toy with our metabolism. The blue light rays that come from these actually trick our brains. If we're using these at night a lot, they trick our brains into thinking that it is daytime, and it makes it harder for us to wind down and go to sleep. And then finally, our brains literally get weak by spending inordinate amounts of time doing the soft, quote-unquote, soft mental activity of media consumption. There's a growing amount of research on this. When you sit and plunk yourself in front of a TV or a video game, you're actually kind of softening your brain because it's not activity that requires you to do a lot of thinking. So if we're going to do an action step on this, similar to the previous one, you'd list all your media habits in order of time committed. So, and whether they're good or bad media habits, the one I do most is, of course, sitting in front of my laptop. I do some appointment TV. I do a fair amount of social media on my gadgets and reading the news on my gadgets. But if I were to list all of them, even though I'm pretty efficient, I could identify a few things that I could do less of. And every once in a while, I do a little check on my media behaviors. And I say, okay, am I reading too many headlines on my iPhone? Because I really don't benefit from reading every story about what's happening in every country in the world, even though I'm kind of a news junkie. So think about that. Think about what media behavior you could replace with a more productive or enriching activity. And I'm going to sort of make a joke here, but if you're watching 3 hours a week of 2.5 Men reruns, think about what you could do with that time. Maybe spend more time with your kids. That's pretty cool. All right, here's a big one. Beating yourself up. And I love this quote: successful people tend to become more successful because they are always thinking about their successes. Well, ADDers, on the other hand, are masters at acknowledging and remembering past failures. We are terrible at acknowledging successes. It's like failures have triple weight, right? You can succeed 3 times and fail once, a forgotten appointment or misplaced keys, and that one failure weighs in our mind more than the 3 successes. This is well documented, and but it is coachable, and it's coachable by ourselves. I love this quote from Claude Monet. This is a guy who completely changed art. Toward the end of his career, he says, "My life has been nothing but a failure, and all that's left for me to do is to destroy my paintings before I disappear." And I can just hear a lot of us ADDers, myself included, you know, having this feeling. There's a thing called imposter syndrome that I've been researching a lot, and I actually wrote a blog on it, a couple of them pretty recently. This is a sort of the extreme form of beating ourselves up. But you know, whether it's extreme imposter syndrome or just kind of feeling, you know, man, I messed that up again, and not giving ourselves credit for our successes, no matter how small, you know, this is classic negative self-talk, and we do it every day, and it has emotional and physical costs. So we have to stop beating ourselves up by dwelling on foibles and celebrate even little successes. I skipped a little too quick there. So there are a number of ways to fix this, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but you know, the first thing is to just be aware of negative self-talk. You know, stop and listen to what's happening in your mind once in a while, or catch yourself saying negative things about yourself. And maybe even observe how rarely you actually say, hey, you know what, I didn't finish that project that I was working on today, but I got it started. I had been putting it off, and I started today, and I moved it forward a few inches. That's great. And listen to how much your content is balanced between the negative and positive, and try and alter that balance a little bit. Another thing is to, you know, not take yourself too seriously. I don't fail. I succeed in finding what does not work. You know, I often laugh at myself because I do something very ADD, but I make sure that I don't call myself what was my nickname when I was growing up. My nickname growing up was Dummy. I actually thought that was my name because my father was calling me Dummy all the time. Dummy, why did you do this? Why can't you do that? You cracked up the car again, you dummy. And what I would do for many years is when I would mess something up or I would misplace something, I would say, you dummy. Why are you such a dummy? And I have taught myself not to do that anymore, instead just to giggle at myself, because I have so many more successes than I do failures. And we all do. It is true of all of us. We are where we are. We may not be where we want to be, but on balance, our successes are always going to be outweighing our failures. We just have to take them into account. And I think the last thing here is, this is Soichiro Honda, who's a hero of mine. His hero was Thomas Edison. He says that success is 99% failure. And I just love this thing I found on the web. You know, people think that success is just this, you know, straight line, and really success is back and forth, one step ahead, two back, two ahead, one back. And importantly, every millimeter toward completion of something is success. And if you actually score your successes, you will find that you're getting the benefit of them. And I get into that in more detail in the ADD Crusher videos, where actually we provide a scorecard where you can track your successes over the course of a week. And that is proven in research to help you do what that initial quote said, which was, successful people are successful because they think about their successes. All right, here's the next one. This is, we psych ourselves out. There are, and I treat a whole bunch of these procrastination areas in the videos, and there are kind of three barriers to action. One is fear, one is disarray, and one is indifference. And we're not going to get into all three. I want to talk about disarray, but these are, in my view, the key barriers to action. That's the reasons why we procrastinate. And in a way, we're just psyching ourselves out, and that's all it is. We can actually retune our brain to not be psyching ourselves out. Let's talk about disarray, because I think this is the most common one. And disarray has two sides to it. The first is deciding what tasks to work on. We know what our to-do lists look like. We often have stickies all over our office or our desk, all things we know we need to do. And very often, if not always, we're having trouble deciding, figuring out how to get, what to work on. And then the other side of disarray is once we decided, okay, I'm going to work on this, figuring out how to get it started. Now, the first thing should be easily dispatched with, deciding what to work on. But that's not as easily done for us ADDers. So I've got a whole bunch of ways that we can filter things to prioritize. But just suffice to say, if the world only let you do 2 things today, what would they be? And if you just apply that filter a little bit, you should be able to at least have a better idea of what you should be working on right now. Now, then we always get to, well, my brain is such a jumble, I can't decide what to prioritize. I know that this one over here is important, but oh, that's right, I forgot about this one over here. Oh my goodness, then there's this whole group of these things over here. Oh my God, I can't decide, and we get paralyzed, right? So we psych ourselves out, and this makes all of our ADHD life worse. So here's the key. If we can't make priority distinctions between our many to-dos, then we are justified in just picking one and doing it, and just throwing a dart at the wall and saying, look, if I can't prioritize between these 5 or 6 or 50 things, just throw a dart, because they are all indistinguishable if we can't distinguish between them. And then give yourself the freedom to just choose one, give yourself permission to choose one and proceed with that. I just sort of quoted David Gort from the ADD Coach Academy. The other problem that we have is once we've decided what to do, we don't know how to approach it. We don't know how to start it. And the short solution, the short answer on this one is, this is a wonderful quote from Martin Luther King Jr., you don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. And the reality is, we think that we need to see the whole process and how this whole thing's going to map out in order for us to begin. And this is a myth that I call the myth of the magic bullet. We think there's going to be, we keep putting something off because we think, well, I'll figure out how to get this thing done. Maybe tomorrow I'll be able to think about it better. But the reality is that it's not until you start something that you actually start to see the solutions and the ways to complete something. So take Martin Luther King's words to heed, as well as our friend Bruce Lee's, all right? So here's the biggest one. This is the biggest brain hack that I teach. I get the most emails on this one. And it's a brain hack that I call Do What You're Doing Now. And you'll understand that in just a second. But this little cartoon is kind of nice. You can see it says call mom and there's math problem. And then, oh, check oven. Well, let me go grab that. And then you realize that there are always going to be a bazillion things out there calling for your attention. This is the cost of multitasking. And I love this quote: much of the stress that people feel doesn't come from having too much to do, it comes from not finishing what they've started. And this is a classic issue for ADDers, and we're going to solve this with a brain hack that requires first awareness of 2 things. The first thing is that multitasking is for suckers. All right? All the research says the same thing. Even the best multitaskers suck at multitasking. This is fact. It's irrefutable. If you were able to go through one day without multitasking, you would see immediate results. But our problem is, and this is the second thing we need to be aware of, we ADDers are easily distracted from whatever we're doing because we're distractible. And the video that I'm about to play for you does a much better job of describing this situation than I can here. So I'm going to let the video take over. And I think I click here, and then I'm going to hand it off to Stuart to play the video. And the solution will be what I call labeling. We'll come back to that.
ADD Crusher. 5 ways, 5 minutes a day. Crush your ADD.
Fact. Linear left-brainers, non-ADDers, prioritize things based on what's most important. Makes sense, right? We ADDers prioritize things based on what's most interesting at the moment.
I don't know if I need
This
to
is
do
why
something.
we are easily pulled away from major important tasks and into low priority wastes
We're
of
not
time that are
playing.
more titillating. Labeling. Labeling
All right.
important
Well,
tasks
if we
and
can't get it to
potential
play,
diversions.
then I'll just
You
have to
need
talk
3
through it.
labels. 1,
Stuart,
what I'm doing
are
now.
you okay with me
2, BS that is
closing
not
this
what I'm
out?
doing now.
Unless you want to
And
try another
3,
way to get it to play? Bear with us. Classic technical glitch. All right. So what I basically did in the video segment, and uh, this is in the ADD Crusher videos, and it might even be available on YouTube to see parts of it. But what I do is I talk about the brain hack of labeling. And what you're doing is you are, because we ADDers are so easily distracted, not by what is most important, but what most interests us at the moment. And that's why when we are in the middle of a task we know we have to do, we are often pulled away by, oh, my friend just texted me, or, oh, you know what, I think I'll check my emails once again. And actually in the videos I do this whole thing about clean the garage on a Saturday, but you know, first let me just make a cup of coffee. Oh, but first let me just check the mail. Oh, there's a sweepstakes entry. Let me just check to make sure I didn't win. But this, but first that, and then you never get to the garage. And we all know this horror story. Well, we don't have to live that. If we were to forcefully label the thing that we have decided to do as this is what I'm doing now, and actually put that label on it mentally, then we would have labels for things that are not what we're doing now. BS, that's not what I'm doing now. That's the text from your friend that is not urgent. And if you label that, you know what, I love my friend, but that's BS and it's not what I'm doing now, you're able to go back to, I'm going to go back to what I'm doing now. Then there are important things that are not what you're doing now. And that's your boss pokes his head in the office and says, hey, and I think I've got a slide for that. And your boss says, now do I have control? I think I need control of the slides again. Stuart. Let's see. I'm trying to click forward and I'm not able to. There we go. Okay. So this would be BS that I'm not doing now. But there are often important things that are not what I'm doing now. And I'm trying to advance this again. There we go. Thank you. So you're working and your boss pokes his or her head in and says, hey, blah, 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 blah. And you know it's important, but you're trying to get done the thing that you're doing now. You can say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing for you. Give me 20 more minutes, and then we'll talk about this thing that you and I need to talk about. So that's what important but not what you're doing now is. So this brain hack, again, it's a little bit better explained in the videos, and the action step that we have with this, and again, if you could advance the slide, thank you, is actually another segment from the video, which I'm assuming that we're going to try it. Let's see, this is a little game show we created.
Here's an action step, 5 minutes.
I hope this plays for this.
This will be an animated exercise. A little weird, perhaps, but it'll be fun. And it actually will help you learn to label thoughts and things so you can stay on task with what you're doing now. Okay, ready? You sit down to pay your bills. Paying your bills is what you're doing now. But soon there will be distractions, each of which you must label. BS that is not what you're doing now, or
all right. Well, we gave it a shot,
but not what you're doing
I'm going
now.
to assume that the video won't.
For starters, your dog wants to go out and play. Label it. Hey, your cousin needs help paying her bills. Here's an action step, 5 minutes. This will be an animated exercise. A little weird, perhaps, but it'll be fun. And it actually will help you learn to label thoughts and things so you can stay on task with what you're doing now. Okay, ready? You sit down to pay your bills. Paying your bills is what you're doing now. But soon there will be distractions, each of which you must label. BS that is not what you're doing now, or important, but not what you're doing now. For starters, Your dog wants to go out and play. Label it. Hey, your cousin needs help paying her bills and wants you to come over. She'll buy the beer. Label it. Your ex from 10 years ago comes out of nowhere texting you to catch up on life because she just got divorced. Label that one. Hey, the Dalai Lama is calling. You have no idea why, but you got to label it. Is it what you're doing now?
All right. Well, I wasn't able to see the video. I did hear the audio. I hope everybody out there saw the video. But even if you didn't, you probably got the idea that we got a game show there where you were given choices after you've been sat down to pay your bills, and then these other things came in to test you, to pull you away. Anyway, I mentioned at the outset of this one that this is the one I get the most mail on. It's a simple brain hack. If you think about it, all you're doing is you're just going to change your perception of what it is you've decided to work on and forcefully label it as what you're doing now. And it has been the single most impactful thing in my life over the years in allowing me to get a lot more stuff done, move forward in my career, have more fun, and just get out of the world of multitasking, which is, again, it's for suckers. I want to, and in the interest of time, I'm going to skip past the doing it all yourself, which is really about, it's about delegating, and that takes a little bit of time to explain. I want to talk about worry, if I can. So if we could advance the slides. Again, I don't have the ability to advance the slides here. So if we, excuse me, if we could advance to the slide with the first one with worry on it, Stuart. All right. I'm still just seeing the title. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So here's a wonderful quote here. Worry does not empty tomorrow of its troubles. It empties today of its strengths. And one of the things that makes our ADHD worse or seem worse is that we spend an awful lot of time fatiguing our minds with worry. And I think this was Napoleon Hill who said this, but mental fatigue is caused less by work than by worry, frustration, and resentment. And it's so true. And as I mentioned earlier in the beating yourself up segment, you know, we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up. We also spend a lot of time worrying. And it makes your ADD worse because it burns scarce mental fuel and makes you less able to take on a tough task when called upon to do so. Moreover, and this is really powerful, and there's a lot of research on this too, creativity and problem solving are locked out when the mind spins on negatives. There's a whole bunch of science about how it triggers the amygdala, reduces oxygen to the brain, etc. And the more worry you have, the more the window to creativity and problem solving closes. Another wise person said, worrying is like praying for what you don't want. And what you don't want is to make your ADHD worse. And what you want is the mental clarity that comes with peace of mind. And there are ADD-friendly ways to achieve it, starting with the simplest type of meditation, which I call shut up you mind. I grew up in New Jersey with a lot of Italian guys, so when I think of meditation, I wanted to think of a way to describe meditation which was simple and doesn't sound like you have to go to a mountain and study for 3 years. Just shut up your mind. And this is a very simple way to cut the worry and to actually power up your mind by quieting it down. And all you're doing is you're just being aware of the content that's whizzing around in your brain. And if we actually listen to it, this seemingly involuntary inner dialogue, we see that we burn fuel mostly on two things: worries about the past and worries about the future. And here's the funny thing, though, about our internal dialogue. It's not totally involuntary. And the funny thing about the past is that it's gone. So no amount of stressing will change it unless we're formulating how to avoid repeating a past mistake. We are wasting time and energy. And then the funny thing about the future is that it's not predictable. So when we're stressing over what's going to happen tomorrow in the parent-teacher conference or the final exam, as we imagine the bad things and feelings to come, you know, unless we're strategizing a solution to a foreseeable problem, we're wasting time and energy. And there's a great Bob Dylan quote that I think we have on the next slide, if we can get to that. Go ahead, click that. There you go. Yesterday is just a memory. Tomorrow is never what it's supposed to be. And that just perfectly encapsulates this whole thing. So again, I think the upshot here is to make sure that you're listening to that inner dialogue. Listen for beating yourself up. Make sure you're inserting more, giving yourself credit for things that you're doing right, and identifying worry, whether it's about the past or the future, and just saying, hey, I'm sitting here worrying about this, and it's not real, it's imagined, and more importantly, if I were to kick into problem solving, I could actually have less to worry about. So I want to make sure we save a lot of time for Q&A. Thank you, Stuart, for advancing these. This is Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I say your action steps to take action every single day. And there might be one more closing slide I've forgotten. Let's see. There you go. And you can do this. And
that's
indeed,
a great ending. Thank you, Alan. I just want you to know that some people were able to see the video, and one person said, oh my goodness, I love that video. It made so much sense. So all of you for whom this technology did not work for whatever mysterious reason, please go to addcrusher.com and check out, and I guess YouTube, right, Alan, and check out these videos because they really are terrific. So
yes, if you go to youtube.com/addcrusher. But actually, I just remembered there is a place where you can see the entire, this is way 8 of video 2, you can see the entire thing. If you go to the ADD Crusher site and go to the blog, do make sure you sign up for that free ebook that we have, because it recaps some of this and has some other stuff that's not in here. But if you go to the blog, there's a blog I did several months ago, and I think it's called, you know, One Way to Save Time by Staying on Task or something like that. And if you find that, down toward the bottom of the blog, we inserted a free view of way 8 from the videos. So yeah. And
okay,
thank you for letting me know that people were able to see it. That's great.
Yeah, it's very odd. Some people saw it and heard the sound. Some people saw it but didn't hear this. Anyway, well, who knows? Technology is mysterious. And lots of people are saying, what was behavior number 6? So and saying things like, I must have been multitasking because I missed it. So you want to just fill us in quickly? What
you
I
bet.
think you,
This one, and I wanted to make sure that we got, you know, the worry went in there, but like
right.
Number 6 was doing it all yourself, and I can just put that in a nutshell for you. My advertising career, I was in the advertising business. I'm still sort of semi-retired from it now, but my career was not advancing. It was before my diagnosis, but a big reason it wasn't advancing is because I couldn't delegate. And the reason that I couldn't delegate is the same reason that all ADDers can't delegate. When you can't outline a path forward, a process, and describe it, you can't delegate that task. So what you need to do as an ADDer is you need to take the time to sit down and say, okay, how would I explain how to get this thing done? And then that
is a huge insight. I don't think I've ever clearly understood before why it's so hard to delegate for ADDers, and I think you've just put your finger on something really important. Yeah.
Right. We are not linear thinkers, so
right.
and delegation requires a linear.
Right.
Here's what you need to do: this, and then this, and then this, because otherwise the person being delegated to comes back and says, you know, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. But there's another reason that we're bad delegators, and that is that we carry a lot of self-esteem baggage, and we don't feel entitled to ask people to do things for us. Even when I was, an executive, a vice president at a major ad agency, I had trouble asking people under me who were 2-3 levels below me to do things because I just didn't feel entitled. So I ended up doing it all myself. But the trick on that one is that you compliment the person on their ability to do this thing better than you, and that makes it a win-win.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. No, but the idea that you have to be able to see the steps ahead of you, which of course is the very thing that we find very difficult
Yes.
in order to delegate, it's really amazing. Can we come back to this really important concept of labeling? What Deb said, I have a sign, what I'm doing now all over my house, and it's changed my life. Thank you, thank you. Can you talk some more about labeling and how to use it? It seems to be a big insight, and a number of people are saying they'd love to try it. How do they go about it?
Well, just to reiterate, what we do in our daily lives is we look at our to-do list, let's say, or we get asked to do something by someone, and we start doing that. And we don't really make a clear distinction between that task and a bunch of other stuff that is inevitably going to tempt us. Again, the text from a friend, the phone call from a friend, you know what, I just want to check my emails again, or even more likely, you know what, I think I'll work on this thing for a couple of minutes. Or, oh, that's right, I forgot to do this thing over here. And so all you're doing with this brain hack is you are forcefully labeling. This is what I'm doing now. This thing, whatever it is, let's say, I'm just going to look for my to-do list, one of my to-do lists. I'm not seeing one handy. Okay, how about this? How about at 9:30 this morning, Pacific time, my to-do was to review my notes for this presentation. And I decided forcefully, this is what I'm doing now. So when the phone rings, or I get a text, or I get tempted to go check my emails again, even though I did it 15 minutes ago, I'm going to say, hold on, that's BS that I'm not doing now. Or when a colleague calls me and says, hey, we need to talk, I can say, you know what, that's important, but it's not what I'm doing now. Hey, Dave, can I call you back in an hour and a half because I actually have to do this webinar? So just the act of having those forceful labels is so empowering. And I tell you, you get it to where it's a habit of yours, and it's such a habit of mine that whenever I'm on an airplane, and I travel a lot, the second we get to 10,000 feet, my laptop opens up and I start to work. And invariably, I will say, under my breath, sort of, that's BS. That's not what I'm doing now, because I get tempted to go do something else. And the person next to me always says, "Were you talking to me?" And I say, "No. And in fact, you're BS that I'm not doing now. So leave me alone." I'm just kidding. I don't really do that, but I do the habit like that, and I say it out loud to myself.
Okay. Question about it from Dominique. Is there any truth to medical reports saying that there's a correlation between multitasking on electronic devices and negative impact on brain function?
I am not aware of research like that. I would be very curious, because that sounds like a really interesting area. If there is, in fact, evidence that multitasking between electronic devices is actually having an impact on mental clarity or some other health-related issue, I'd love to know it. But just know, again, I'll just reiterate that the seminal research was done at Yale on this about 10 years ago, as we became more device-oriented and two working parents and all this, and we're all multitasking. And it was very clearly determined. And then there have been many research pieces done after that. They're all saying the same thing. There is no research anywhere that says that doing 5 things at the same time or over the course of an hour, bouncing between them, is more efficient than just doing one of them at a time. The jury is out, and they are back in, and it's done. So
wow.
If you find yourself multitasking, just know you're making your ADHD worse.
Wow. What about the idea of keeping 2 tasks going? Well, some people have said that as a strategy to deal with sort of tedium. So working on one for a while and then working on the other. I guess what you're saying is that's not multitasking. That's going from one task to another task.
That's exactly right. And Peter Bregman, who's a very prolific author on productivity, he talks about how that is really switching tasks. Now, switching between tasks is also hugely inefficient, because the time it takes you to get re-engaged in that other thing can cost you 5 minutes. And if you re-engage in another task 10 times a day, that's 50 minutes. And over the course of a week, that's almost a full workday. And so was it any wonder that I was working every Saturday for many, many years in the advertising business? But there is another way to switch tasks, which I teach in the videos, which is more productive. And that is that if you are doing something, you're working on something and you get fatigued, and look, we ADDers get fatigued after 15, 20 minutes. A little bit longer if you're eating protein. But what you can do is you can say, all right, I'm going to stop pushing forward with this because I'm getting declining returns, but I'm going to switch to a related task. So I'm going to go and just do a little bit of light research, or I'm going to make a phone call that's related to this project and use a different brain muscle, and then I'm able to come back after 10
Right.
Another thing you can do is you can get up and you're fatigued with that one task, but you know you want to get it done and there's no other pressing issue. You can get up and do a power pose. That is simply standing up, and I won't get into this in detail, but just get up and put your hands on your hips and your head, chin up, and just relax your mind and your body for a couple of minutes, and it actually restores, reduces your cortisol, it brings oxygen back to your brain. Then grab a little handful of nuts and a dried apricot. I've got my bag of them right here in my desk.
Wow.
And then you've got a protein hit with a little bit of glucose with fiber, which is the apricot, and now you're ready to rock it again, and you're good for another 20 minutes. So that's the thing that I use.
So that's great. So instead of paying the price of transitioning, which makes you lose productivity, take a restorative break and then back at it. Yeah, makes sense.
Well said. Well said.
For what you're talking about, people are concluding that this relates to-do lists, and there are a number of questions about how to create a to-do list. First of all, is a to-do list part of this notion of staying on task and labeling? Are they connected at all? And what do you recommend on the to-do list front?
Well, my main recommendation on to-do lists is to try to have one, if you can. I actually have 3 because I'm still involved in the advertising business, and then I run ADD Crusher, and then I have a personal to-do list, which is just, you know, running around errands and stuff like that. And what happens when I mix them all up is that it's tougher to prioritize, so I keep them separate. And I go between one and the other depending on urgency. But I think the biggest thing for ADDers in their to-do list, whether you have one or you're using 3 like I do, is don't be afraid to always go in and update it. Don't be afraid to rewrite it. I think a lot of us feel like we're wasting time if we do that. But the exercise, the mental exercise of doing that is very powerful because it puts you back in touch with what's important, what's on your to-do list. I mean, how often do we look at our to-do list and we see an item 5 spaces down and we go, oh my God, I forgot about that thing. Oh. And so the more you review your to-do list and spend time with it, a lot of productivity experts say you should schedule 5 minutes every morning just to look at your to-do list. So I think that's a big thing. And the more you're familiar with your to-do list, the less intimidating it can be. And you all know how paralyzing it can be when you look at a lot of stickies that are around and you just can't make sense of them all and you get paralyzed and you end up doing what? You end up escaping and saying, you know what, all this stuff is freaking me out. I'm now going to just go check my emails again.
Right, right. How do you keep your to-do lists, may I ask? Paper, phone?
I do both electronic and paper. But to clarify, my to-do lists are mainly on paper.
Okay.
But what I do is I have backups. So I use my calendar. So when I know there's for instance, this morning, I know that I needed to get on the phone with you guys 10 minutes before the hour. I also knew that I wanted to sit down and spend 20 minutes just reviewing my notes. So what I do is I not only put a to-do in my calendar for that so that it pops up at that time or a few minutes before that, I also do a second entry on my calendar that says prep. Or, 10 minutes before I'm supposed to be on 10 minutes early, it goes prep call with Stuart. I have a dental appointment this afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific time, but I have a reminder in my calendar that says prep dentist, and that comes up 45 minutes before the dental appointment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Puts it on the front of my brain. So in a way, my calendar is a secondary to-do list. So I can go back into my to-do list. I can go back into my calendar and look at some of the old events, like they come up through, what's it called? Office reminders, Microsoft Office reminders, and it lists all the things that I haven't checked off, and that could be a secondary. Oh, that's right, I was going to do this thing a couple weeks ago with blah, 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 blah.
But so in essence, you're prioritizing your to-do list because the things that you enter into your calendar are the high priority items because you're giving yourself notice that they're coming up.
Yes, I think they're high priority in the sense that they are things that are potentially I'm going to completely forget them and it's going to be embarrassing. These are like appointments. But high priority to-dos are things like big projects that Stephen Covey would say are third quadrant, which are, important for your life and your career. And so those things are
those are the tough
maybe
ones.
big priorities because they're bigger projects. But I use the calendar mainly for things that if I don't do this, it's going to get embarrassing.
Okay. In terms of staying on task, question here, what happens when you're working from home and the distraction are from your own family members? Someone else says, if you don't take your dog out to play, you'll have a neurotic dog tearing up your house. But it's another problem. Right?
Well, look, that's a fair point about the little game show that we did, and I realize that those are all, your ex from 10 years ago coming back into your life might actually be a very important thing if you're still single. I get that. But, and this is important because of family members, for a busy mom or a dad, who's got kids, I get that. And I work a lot with the gals at Impact ADHD, who you guys are probably familiar with, but they teach parents coping strategies for working with ADHD kids. Obviously when there are things that are urgent, like your kid has, come up with a plastic bag on his head or something crazy, we got to do that. But I've actually been working with a coach in the Netherlands who is an affiliate of ours, and she actually does group coaching with the ADD Crusher videos. We've just had them translated into Dutch. And I had been doing a lot of Skyping with her. And she just has this thing where her son comes into the room and he's 5 years old and I want this now. And she's just taught him to do this game. All right, listen, I'm doing this with Alan right now, and I'm going to come and I'm going to do that with you in 10 minutes. Is that okay if we do it in 10 minutes? Mm-hmm. And then he says, okay, Mom. Of course, he says it in Dutch, but then he runs and he does it. And so she's sort of just made an adult agreement with him. And I think that's something that we don't often take the time to do, is just treat our kids like adults and say, hey, you know what, I'm doing this right now, but I'll tell you what, let's do that thing, and you can help me do that thing in 10 minutes. And then what you got to do is you got to set a timer, and that I do a lot. I just set a timer for 9 minutes, and that's my reminder. Hey, you know what, Alan, I have to get off the phone because remember, I promised my son that I was going to do so-and-so with him.
Timers are so unbelievably valuable in so many ways. It's interesting that you say that about sort of standing up, if you will, to your family members who might be intruding. I wonder if it's the same sort of lack of confidence that keeps us from asking other people to help, or basically standing up for what we need to do to get things done. Because you're right. There's no reason why you can't say to a family member, I'm in the middle of something. I'll be with you in 10 minutes or whatever it might be.
Right. And it may not be that you're on a phone call with somebody. It may just be that you're working on an email, or that you just need to finish reading. You can say, you know what, Mommy has to finish reading this chapter of this book, or has to finish studying this thing, or whatever it is. Or, you know what, Mommy just needs to be alone for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just wanted, there's so many interesting questions and so much in what you said. It's so rich. But I just want to take a few minutes toward the end of this, unfortunately too short time, to talk about in general coaching. A number of people are intrigued by the kinds of help that you offer and wonder how does coaching work with people? Do you recommend coaching? How does one go about finding someone to help them with the kinds of advice that you've given today?
Actually, I just did last month, it was in March, I just did a keynote at a conference in Holland, and my keynote was about what works and doesn't work in ADHD solutions. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that on my list of things that work is coaching.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's the most powerful thing you can do. And you know what? I realize that coaching costs money, and that it might even be intimidating. But what you can do is contact a coach. We actually have a list of coaches on our site in the coach directory under resources, and just speak with a coach. Most coaches will give you a free brief consultation, and you can start to feel out who you're comfortable with. And you know what? Even if you just had 2 sessions with a coach, you could see some changes in your life. I don't do very much one-on-one coaching anymore, but there are some coaches that do group coaching with the ADD Crusher videos. And keep in mind too, and it's not in good taste to be selling here, but for whatever it's worth, the ADD Crusher videos are designed to be a virtual coach. I sort of yell at you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
and that's
great.
why we have action steps at the end of every strategy. So listen, in whatever form you can get it, try coaching because it is powerful. There's also plenty of research on that coaching is effective and that it works.
All right. Well, Heather says, I just want to say this dude is great. The way he talks just straight to the point is awesome. So there's a few fans here, Alan.
Thank you.
Last question, I guess, from Wendy. Do you have any tips for getting started? It's my biggest obstacle. And that comes up all the time for ADD.
Oh, I love this. I love this one. So here's a reason why we don't start. A reason why we don't start is because, one, we think, well, I can't finish that thing anyway. It's too big a thing. I'm afraid I'm going to fail. There's also disarray, which is I don't know where to start, but we talked about that. There is fear of making a fool of yourself, or fear that it's going to be too hard, or fear of some confrontation in the process. There's also indifference, which is the laundry, washing the car. Regular people can get all fired up about doing the laundry. Oh yeah, laundry, baby. Woo! But we ADDers, we don't have the dopamine. We need more interesting things. But here's the amazing thing about starting. Here's the brain hack here. Give yourself permission to fail. Actually, just did probably the most popular blog ever. It was just a month or 2 ago. It simply says, if you want to finish something, give yourself permission to fail completely and miserably. And all that is doing is saying, just start. Don't worry about finishing anything. If you just give yourself permission to start and work on it for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and then if you only work for 1 minute, great. At least you started. Then pat yourself on the back for having started it. What you find is, more often than not, you start to see how to finish it, being in it. You also find that you might be in it for 20 minutes. Oh my God, I've just been working on this thing that I so did not want to start doing. I started into it. Now it's 20 minutes in, and I actually moved it forward. But give yourself permission to fail. That's the best way to start something.
That's great tip. Alan, thank you so much. Appreciate everything you offered today. Great tips. Folks listening, May 27th, Sex, Love, and ADHD, What Teens and Young Adults Need to Know with Wes Crenshaw, fabulous with young adults. And then June 2nd, Dr. Ned Hallowell on how to talk about ADHD to your child, your family, and the world. Not grandiose. We're ready to tackle it. So hope you'll come back and check in with us. And thank you all for attending. And thank you again so much, Alan Brown. Everyone, please check out ADD Crusher. You can have coaching via your video screen by one of the best. Thank you all.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone.